They call it the A-10 Thunderbolt II, but to the men on the ground, it's got a better name. The Warthog. Ugly? Sure. But it's the kind of ugly that saves lives. Built not to impress, but to endure. This thing isn't just a plane. It's America's tank killer. The guardian angel that shows up when the firefight gets too close for comfort. When it screams across the sky and that deep BRRRT echoes through the valley. Every soldier down there knows help just arrived. Now, the Warthog isn't much to look at. Short, stocky, twin engines perched high like a pair of stubborn bulldogs. But the more you learn about it, the more you realize that awkward shape, it's all function over form. Every inch of this beast was engineered for one mission. Keep flying, keep fighting, and bring the pilot home. Under the hood, or rather, under those broad, straight wings, lies something extraordinary. A 30mm cannon so massive, it's literally bigger than a Volkswagen Beetle. That's not an exaggeration. The GAU-8 Avenger defines this aircraft. It's so big that the plane itself was basically built around the gun. You could say other jets have a cannon, but the A-10? The cannon has a jet. Now, the version we're talking about today, the A-10C, is the most modern, most refined iteration of this flying tank. It's proof that sometimes old-school toughness still beats futuristic flash. Let's talk size for a second. 53 feet long, nearly 15 feet tall, and a wingspan pushing 60 feet. She's no featherweight either, almost 25,000 pounds empty, but can launch off the runway carrying twice her own weight in fuel and weapons. That's like a pickup truck hauling another pickup truck full of bombs. And while other aircraft chase speed or stealth, the A-10 chases something else entirely: survivability. 95% of her body is built from stress and corrosion-resistant aluminum, not composites. You can dent it, puncture it, blast it, and she'll still limp home. Flat plates, riveted panels, old-school engineering that works because it's easy to fix, even in the middle of nowhere. Lose a panel on the left, swap it with one from the right. This plane was built by mechanics who thought, if we can't fix it in the field, it's not worth building. Up front sits that monstrous cannon, the A-10's heart and soul. In the middle, her fuel tanks nestle deep for protection. And in the back, an auxiliary power unit, the little engine that keeps her alive on the ground, feeding her breath and blood when the main engines sleep. But maybe the most distinctive feature of all, those wings. They look simple, straight, almost primitive, compared to sleek fighters like the F-16. But that's the point. They're designed for low altitude, low-speed warfare, where every inch of lift, every second of hang time matters. 3 main spars hold them steady. The outer sections tilt upwards slightly, what engineers call a dihedral angle for stability. And those drooping tips, the Hohner wingtips, they cut drag and smooth the airflow like a muscle car's spoiler gripping the air. Everything about the Warthog screams one philosophy: get close, hit hard, stay alive. And maybe that's why, despite its looks, the A-10 has become one of the most beloved aircraft in the US arsenal. Because when the chips are down, soldiers don't care how pretty their guardian angel is, they just care that it shows up. The A-10's wings aren't just wings, they're the backbone of the beast. Right through the middle runs a straight center section, packed with built-in fuel tanks, like veins carrying the lifeblood of the Warthog. Out toward the edges, the wings tilt upward, just 7 degrees, But that little angle gives her a sense of balance, a kind of steady swagger when she's cutting through the air. They're built from honeycomb panels, light as aluminum, tough as nails. You'll find the same structure throughout the jet. Everything about the A-10 whispers, "I'm hard to kill." And then there are those drooped wing tips, the so-called Herner tips. They're not there to look cool, though, honestly, they kind of do. They cut, drag, make the air slide smoother, and give the hog the stamina to hang over a battlefield longer than any other bird in the sky. That droop also sharpens her reflexes, like a street brawler ready to pivot and strike low. You see, the A-10 isn't about speed, it's about staying power. While fighters like the F-16 slice through the stratosphere, the hog stays close to the dirt, slow, steady, relentless. And thanks to those wings, she can take off in less than 4,000 feet of runway, shorter than some shopping mall parking lots. That's called STOL, short takeoff and landing. It means this plane can launch from a bombed-out airstrip or a dusty stretch of highway and still bring the pain where it's needed most. Her low-mounted, straight wings aren't glamorous, but they're practical. They give room for more weapons, pylons, more payload, without messing up her low-level handling. Every decision here screams one thing: function first. Now, when it comes to control, the A-10 is downright overbuilt, and that's a compliment. Her control surfaces are massive compared to most jets, because when you're flying low and slow through anti-aircraft fire, you want all the leverage you can get. The ailerons stretch across nearly half the wingspan. That's unheard of. They're split in two, acting as both roll controls and air brakes, called decelerands. When the pilot opens them, air resistance spikes, slowing the plane like a handbrake turn in a muscle car. Behind them, the Fowler flaps, hydraulically powered, adjustable in 3 positions, add lift for takeoff or landing. Set at 20 degrees in production models, they give the hog that soft, floating grace right before touchdown. And get this, if one flap gets blown clean off, the A-10 can still fly. It's like a boxer missing a glove, but still ready to throw punches. Inside, the control system is a triumph of redundancy. 2 hydraulic lines, completely independent, run the show, with a manual cable backup just in case things go south. If hydraulics fail, the pilot can still fly the jet home in manual reversion mode. No autopilot. No fancy fly-by-wire. Just raw cable and grit. If an emergency hits, pitch and yaw controls auto-engage, while roll control stays in the pilot's hands. The machine literally helps you survive. And then there's the tail, the empennage, as engineers call it. Twin vertical stabilizers stand proud, like twin shark fins slicing through the air. If one gets blown off, the other one's got your back. They're built from the same honeycomb composite as the wings, light, strong, easy to swap left for right in the field. Same goes for the elevators, each with trim tabs for fine-tuned control. Finally, powering this whole beast, 2 General Electric F-34GE100 turbofans, each kicking out over 9,000 pounds of thrust. Mounted high and behind the wings, they sit like twin guard dogs watching over the tail. Their exhaust nozzles angle upward, keeping the heat plume away from the ground and, more importantly, away from infrared-seeking missiles. Smart move. And because each engine lives in its own separate housing, even if one gets shredded by enemy fire, the other keeps running. That's redundancy done right. I've always thought if the A-10 were a person, it'd be that grizzled veteran who's been through hell, patched up with duct tape and grit, still standing tall and still ready to fight. Because in a world obsessed with stealth and speed, the Warthog reminds us that sometimes the toughest thing you can be is unbreakable. Each of the A-10's twin engines, the General Electric TF-34S, is a mechanical masterpiece in its own right. They're built like old American pickup trucks, simple, rugged, and dead easy to fix when things go wrong. Each engine breaks down into 5 main sections, and the beauty of the design is in its practicality. A single-stage fan with titanium blades, light but tough, can be pulled out one by one through side access panels. No need to tear the whole thing apart. The Air Force mechanics love that. It's a dream for field maintenance. Inside, a 14-stage axial compressor keeps the air moving, and the first 5 stages use variable stator vanes that twist automatically, like a living creature adjusting its breath. That's the secret to its efficiency. Smooth airflow, no surges, no hiccups. Then comes the annular combustion chamber, forged from nickel-based alloy, the kind of metal that laughs in the face of heat. It's built to last, even after thousands of missions in sand, snow, and smoke. Together, these turbines can take the Warthog from idle to full throttle in 10 seconds flat. 10 seconds. That's all it takes for this beast to go from calm to combat. The A-10's fuel system is just as battle-ready. All 4 main tanks sit snug around the aircraft's center of gravity, tucked safely inside the armor-lined belly. If a bullet wants to reach them, it's got to chew through several layers of aluminum and luck. The wing tanks hold about 622 gallons, the fuselage tanks another 1,022, a total of 1,644 gallons of jet fuel, enough to loiter above the battlefield for hours. And even if an enemy shell punches through, the fuel lines seal themselves automatically, cutting off leaks before they become fireballs. There are even 2 self-sealing sump tanks, like hidden reserves, good for 230 miles of flight if everything else is burning. That means even when she's bleeding, this old hog can still limp back to friendly skies. But all of this, the engines, the tanks, the armor, it all exists for one reason: to serve the gun. The A-10's heart and soul is the GAU-8 divided by A Avenger, a 7-barrel 30mm Gatling cannon so massive it practically defines the aircraft. Fully loaded, it weighs 3,900 pounds, nearly 20% of the plane's entire weight. In other words, the A-10 isn't a jet with a gun attached, it's a gun with wings. Each barrel has its own chamber and bolt, spinning around a central cam system that loads, fires, and ejects casings, all in a single fluid motion. It's engineering poetry written in titanium and smoke. When it fires, it doesn't just bark, it growls, a deep mechanical snarl that cuts through the sky. At 4,200 rounds per minute, the roar blends into one continuous sound, that famous BRRRT every soldier knows by heart. You don't hear each round, you feel them. The A-10C model tones the rate down to 3,900 rounds per minute, not because it can't handle more, but to give the gun a longer life. Even throttled back, it's devastating. Each round leaves the barrel at over 3,000 feet per second, faster than the speed of sound. And here's the soldier's joke on the ground: if you can hear the A-10, you're not the target. The cannon sits slightly off-center on the left, but the center barrel fires dead straight through the aircraft's nose. That alignment keeps the recoil, nearly 19,000 pounds of force, from throwing the jet off aim. That's roughly equal to both engines running at full thrust. So when the Warthog pulls the trigger, it literally slows itself down. And that's the paradox of the A-10, a slow plane that hits like a thunderclap, a clumsy-looking relic of the Cold War that still sends shivers through tank crews today. If you ask me, that's what makes the Warthog so special. It's not pretty, it's not fast, but it's honest. It was built to fight, to take a beating, and to bring its pilot home. And there's something profoundly American about that. Massive doesn't even cut it. When the GAU-8 spins up to its full scream, about 4,200 rounds per minute, the recoil is a mind-bending 19,000 pounds of force. To put that in plain English, the cannon kicks like it's trying to wrestle the whole airplane to a stop. In fact, the A-10's two engines together only make roughly 18,000 pounds of thrust at full bore. So when the hog opens up, it literally bleeds speed under its own gunfire. That's not theater, that's physics. Most of the time, pilots fire in short, controlled bursts, and the average shove back on the airframe drops to about 10,000 pounds. Still enough to make you feel it in your bones. And feeding this monster is no small chore. A massive ammunition drum sits up front and can hold 1,200 rounds of 30mm shells, though in combat they usually load about 1,174. Those are not BBs. Each round is thicker and longer than a typical energy drink can. Think of a can stretched and hardened into an armor-piercing spear. All that brass up front changes how the airplane behaves as the fight goes on. As rounds burn through, the plane's balance shifts, lighter in the nose, a subtle but real change in handling. Engineers solved a nasty little problem with a clever, almost old-school trick. They route the spent casings back into the drum instead of dumping them overboard. So the empty shells act like counterweights, ballast, keeping the Warthog trimmed right where the pilot expects it. Bonus: you don't get thousands of hot brass shells sucked into the engines. Nobody wants that. Now let's talk about what those rounds do on impact. The loadout typically mixes one high-explosive incendiary round for every 5 armor-piercing incendiary tracers, a brutal cocktail designed to both penetrate and ignite. The armor-piercing core is often made from depleted uranium, a material with some uncomfortable qualities. It's not the glowing radioactive stuff from the movies, but it's still heavy and terrifyingly effective. On impact, depleted uranium tends to self-sharpen, so instead of mushrooming bluntly, it keeps biting through armor. When it chews through a target, hot fragments and burning particles can set off stored ammunition or fuel inside vehicles, turning an armor breach into a catastrophic fireball. If you strip away the jargon, what you have is simple and savage: a gun designed to break tanks, and a plane built to survive shooting that gun. Personally, and maybe this is the romantic in me talking, I can't help but respect the brutal honesty of it. It's not trying to be elegant. It's not courting headlines or awards. It's a tool, forged for a job, merciless and effective. And in the chaos of a battlefield, that kind of blunt, uncompromising utility has saved lives. They say the Warthog's bark is bad, but its bite? That's something else entirely. When the US ran combat tests against captured Soviet T-62 tanks, they wanted to see just how much damage this beast could really do. The results were brutal. Out of 10 tanks lined up for the test, the GAU-8 chewed through 6 like they were made of tin, and 3 simply ceased to exist. Catastrophic damage was the polite term the engineers used. In plain English, the tanks were gone. And the cannon, as terrifying as it is, is only part of the Warthog's arsenal. This bird can haul 16,000 pounds of ordnance across 11 hardpoints, 8 under those broad, stubby wings and 3 under the fuselage. That's enough payload to make a small Air Force blush. She carries everything: laser-guided bombs, GPS-guided munitions, AGM-65 Mavericks, Hydra 70 rocket pods, even a pair of AIM-9 Sidewinders, just in case some hotshot fighter pilot decides to pick a fight. The A-10 was never just a flying gun. It's a full-blown armory with wings. Back in 1978, the first major upgrade came in the form of the PAVE Penny Pod, a laser receiver mounted under the cockpit. It didn't shoot lasers, it listened to them, catching reflections from ground designators so the HOG could drop bombs with sniper precision. But as technology evolved, so did the HOG. Today's A-10C carries the AN divided by AAQ-28 Lightning Pod, built by Northrop Grumman, a high-tech Swiss Army knife combining laser targeting, range finding, and thermal optics. It lets the pilot see, mark, and destroy targets faster than ever before. And if you want proof that all this technology isn't just for show, go back to the 6th of April 2003, Baghdad. Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Strasburger led a flight of A-10Cs toward the Tigris River Bridge, where a column of enemy armor was hammering Task Force 2/69. Visibility was barely a mile and a half. A sandstorm thick enough to chew, but Strasburger pushed on. Inside his cockpit, a 1,200-pound titanium bathtub, he danced through tracer fire like a man who'd made peace with danger. For 33 minutes straight, the sky was chaos: smoke, sand, and steel. But the HOG thrived in it. Flying below 1,000 feet, weaving between clouds and anti-aircraft bursts, Strasburger made precise attack runs that only the A-10 could pull off. Its wide wings and slow speed let him see every target, and its toughness let him stay. He yanked through turns, pulling over 7Gs, circling back again and again, strafing tanks, ripping open armored columns, never losing track of his own guys on the ground. When the dust settled, 3 T-70, 2 seconds, and 6 APCs were nothing but burning wrecks, a single battalion-sized armored force, erased by 2 A-10 seconds and the willpower of men who refused to back off. And what kept them in the fight wasn't brute strength alone, it was endurance. The A-10's twin turbofan engines sipped fuel like it was fine whiskey, letting Strasburger and his wingmen stay overhead until the job was done. They didn't just win the engagement, they changed its course, clearing the path for Task Force 2/69 to encircle Baghdad. Later, Lieutenant Colonel J.R. Sanderson summed it up best. The F-15 seconds and F-16 seconds were good, but the A-10 seconds, they were fantastic. As long as that HOG was above us, turning, rolling, watching, we could do anything we wanted. You could hear the cheers when someone on the radio said, "We've got 8 seconds inbound." And maybe that's why soldiers love the Warthog like no other plane. It's not glamorous, it's not stealthy, but when you're pinned down and you hear that deep, rumbling brrrr echo through the sky, that's not just sound, that's salvation in aluminum and titanium. The cockpit of the A-10 is as practical as it is protective. A single-seat design with a bubble canopy giving full 360-degree visibility. Because when you're flying that low, seeing the ground isn't optional, it's survival. Inside, the pilot sits inside that titanium bathtub, 1,200 pounds of armor plating, tough enough to shrug off direct hits from 23mm cannon shells. Everything about the Warthog's design, from its wings to its armor to its ugly, lovable face, tells the same story. You can shoot it, you can scar it, but you will never stop it. The A-10's cockpit isn't just a seat, it's a fortress. Built like a bank vault with wings, it can take direct hits from 23mm cannons and even shrug off fragments from 57mm shells. Every inch of that protection is titanium, forged into plates up to 1.5 inches thick, carefully arranged based on where enemy fire is most likely to come from. To a pilot, that armor isn't weight, it's peace of mind. It makes up about 5% of the A-10's total empty weight, but it's the difference between coming home and becoming a memory. And the inside walls? Lined with multi-layer nylon shields, the kind of detail you don't appreciate until shrapnel's ricocheting around the cockpit. Over the years, the Warthog has evolved. The old analog dials of the A-10 amperes are gone, replaced by the glass cockpit of the modern A-10C. Two-color multifunction displays, each 5.5 inches across, glow with moving maps, weapon data, and digital targeting overlays. It's not flashy, just brutally efficient. The controls are hands-on throttle and stick, borrowing the best of the F-16's flight stick and the F-15's throttle. The setup gives pilots instinctive control, like shifting gears in a muscle car, everything right where it needs to be. Behind it all hums a brain of modern avionics. Multiband comms, GPS, inertial nav, Link 16 data link, SATCOM, the works. The integrated flight and fire control computer handles all the math for weapon trajectories so the pilot doesn't have to. In other words, point, squeeze, destroy. Startup in an A-10 isn't a press button and go affair. It's a ritual, performed by men and women who know that every switch, every gauge, every hum matters. First, battery switch, power, inverter, standby. That breathes life into the Warthog's veins. The pilot scans the panels. Engine instruments alive, fire, detection and air. Bleed systems checked, warning lights glowing in quiet symphony. Fuel? Check. Oxygen? Check. Heart rate? Probably spiking. But batteries alone won't spin those big turbofans. For that, the hog needs a kick, pressurized air from the APU, the auxiliary power unit. The pilot flips the APU switch, waits for the left fuel press light to wink out. That tiny green light means the fuel pumps are alive, time to wake the beast. The left engine roars first, a deep metallic growl that rattles through the cockpit floor. The pilot watches the gauges dance, oil pressure, RPM, temperature, all in the green. Then the right engine comes online, harmonizing like twin thunder rolling across an empty airfield. Once both turbines are steady, the APU shuts down, its job done. Now it's time for the last checks. Systems, hydraulics, flight controls, software, everything configured for the mission. The pilot taxis out slowly, snow or dust curling behind the tires. The A-10's nose gear has a little quirk. It turns tighter to the right than to the left. A small detail, but forget it once, and you'll carve circles on the tarmac like a rookie. At the end of the runway, the ritual reaches its crescendo. Flaps down, throttles forward, brakes off. The Warthog lurches ahead, engines howling. She's not fast, never pretended to be, but she's got soul. 1,000 feet into the roll, the pilot checks engine RPMs. Everything looks good. 10 knots before takeoff speed, he eases back on the stick. The nose rises, 10 degrees of pitch, and the hog leaves the earth with the grace of a heavyweight boxer stepping into the ring. No drama, no flair. Just raw, deliberate power. And as the Warthog climbs into the morning light, its titanium armor glinting in the sun, you can't help but think, this plane was never meant to be beautiful. It was meant to endure. And in a sky full of stealth and speed, there's still something timeless about an aircraft that wins wars by being too tough to die. The Warthog gathers speed, slow at first, then faster, until its nose begins to rise, heavy and deliberate, like a bull preparing to charge, and then, almost reluctantly, it leaves the ground. Once airborne, the pilot retracts the landing gear, those chunky, rugged legs folding into the belly of the beast, but keeps the same climb angle for another few seconds, letting her stretch her wings and breathe. 10 knots past takeoff speed, he brings the flaps in, and just like that, the hog is free to fly. This isn't a graceful ballet like a fighter jet taking off from an aircraft carrier. No, the A-10's takeoff looks earned. It's a machine built for grit, not glamour, and she can do it anywhere, on busted runways, cracked taxiways, even straight stretches of highway if the war demands it. That's the power of her reinforced landing gear and low-pressure tires. The same kind you'd expect on a farm tractor that just happens to fly. Once she's up there, the Warthog finds her rhythm. She cruises at about 300 knots, roughly 350 miles per hour. Not exactly blazing speed, but that's the point. She's not built to outrun trouble. She's built to find it, stare it in the face, and help the guys on the ground walk away alive. At low altitudes, the A-10 is surprisingly agile, pulling up to 5.8 Gs in tight turns. She can fly effectively under a 1,000-foot ceiling, in visibility so bad it'd ground most other jets. That's where she thrives, the ugly weather, the chaos, the noise. And her loiter time, her ability to circle above the battlefield, is the stuff of legend. Nearly 2 hours on station, orbiting at 5,000 feet, ready to drop hell on command. Her combat radius usually sits around 250 nautical miles, but with her fuel efficiency and 1,600+ gallons in the tanks, she can stretch to 800 miles easy. Give her a mid-air refueling, and she can stay in the fight practically all day long. Landing, though, is where the A-10's toughness really shows. Unlike sleek fighters that need spotless runways, the hog can plant herself on dirt, snow, gravel, you name it. Big wings, low wing loading, and strong legs make it possible. The pilot drops the flaps to 20 degrees, splits the ailerons to act as air brakes, and rides her down steady. Even if the landing gear doesn't come down, no problem. The main wheels stick out slightly, acting like built-in skids. It's the kind of insurance policy you only appreciate when you need it most. Take Colonel Harry Iceman Keeling, for example. He once had to land without a nose gear. Most jets would have been written off before touching down, not the Warthog. He kept her level at 160 knots, eased back to just above stall speed, about 120, and let her belly slide onto the runway, smooth as you please. When she finally came to rest, there was no explosion, no drama, just a shower of sparks and a heartbeat's worth of silence. A week later, after a little sheet metal patchwork and a few wrench turns, that same aircraft was back in the sky, ready for another fight. Try that with an F-16. The A-10 Thunderbolt II isn't just a plane, it's a statement. Born from the blood and smoke of Vietnam, sharpened by the Cold War, and proven over the deserts of Iraq, it became the blueprint for how to build something that refuses to die. Its GAU-8 cannon is unmatched. Its armor can take a beating that would kill lesser jets, and its ability to hang in the fight, low and slow, made it the most beloved guardian angel any soldier could ask for. Yeah, she's not fast, she's not stealthy, she's not pretty, but the men and women who've watched her scream over the battlefield, who've heard that BRRRT rip through the chaos, they'll tell you she's perfect in her own way. But all legends meet their sunset. As warfare changes, so must the machines. The Air Force has decided to retire the A-10, trading her armor and cannon for the speed and reach of the new F-15EX Eagle II. It's a hard pill to swallow for those who grew up trusting that growl in the sky. Still, maybe that's how it's supposed to be. Heroes don't vanish. They just make room for the next generation. And somewhere, someday, when soldiers hear thunder overhead, they'll still think of her, the Warthog, the tank killer, the angel in armor.